No, it's one.
Get up there.
One.
Action. Young kids grow up hearing tall tales of the Wild West. They pretend and play cowboys and Indians. The question is, was the West really wild? Did the cowboys and Indians fight and have a hootering, hollering time? This is the Wild West, in plain English. Most cowboys lived on ranches. They were outdoorsy and wild. They mostly took care of the cattle. Their job wasn't easy and they had to drive cattle across vast parts of land. Most cowboys were skilled on horseback and roping. They wore Stetson hats and chaps over denim jeans and usually carried a rifle or pistol. Many different Native American nations lived on the Great Plains. Plains Indians were skilled artists and warriors. In the 1400s, the Spanish introduced the horse into the region, and it became part of the Native American culture. The buffalo served as a primary food, shelter, and clothing source. The Indian respected nature and didn't waste any part of the animal. Indian women oversaw life at home and made food. They took care of the children and engaged in lots of crafts. Native American men hunted and protected their people. They provided military leadership and waged war to defend or extend territory. The cattle kingdom and farming. Before the settlers moved to the Southwest, Spanish and Mexicans had set up cattle ranches. Over time, strays from these cattle ranches, along with American breed, formed large herds of wild cattle called longhorns. Following the Civil War, demand for beef increased in the East. Ranchers began employing cowhands to tend cattle and drive herds to the market. American cowhands learned much about riding, roping, and branding from the Spanish and Mexican vaqueros. These cowhands became known as cowboys. A cattle drive was long, hot, and dirty. They usually days lasted up to 18 hours. Cowhands worked in all kinds of dangers like prairie dog holes, rattlesnakes, thunderstorms, and thieves. Drives ended up in cow towns, which were located along railroad lines. These are the places where cowboys and fights in bars and showdowns went to jail. In the 1870s, farmers began moving in. They fenced their fields in barbed wire, which kept the cattle from pushing over fences and trampling plowed fields. As more farmers bought land, the open ranges were beginning to disappear. The cattle kingdom had come to an end. Congress passed the Homestead Act in 1862, which promised 160 acres of free land for anyone who paid a small filling fee and farmed it for 5 years. Many people rushed to accept the offer of free land. By 1900s, 500,000 Americans had set up farms under the Homestead Act. Farmers faced many hardships, but the main one was shelter. There was very little wood on the plains, so they had to make their houses of mud. They were very messy, especially when it rained. The fertile soil of the plains was covered in a thick layer of sod, which that would crack an iron plow. So they invented a steel plow. Technology helped farmers in many ways. The plains summers were dry with little rain, and the winters were worse with huge snowdrifts covering everything. Despite the hardships, they were selling huge amounts of wheat and corn to the nation's biggest cities in Europe. Time to summarize. Cowboys, farmers, and Indians lived in the West. The cowboys drove cattle to markets and were very rowdy. Indians lived on the plains, hunted, and fought for lands between themselves. They respected nature and kept sacred cultures. Farmers moved in, and the cattle disappeared. They profited from wheat and corn. This was the Wild West in plain English.
Yeehaw!